Like we're still working on it. So
May I ask a
this is
question?
the draft.
May I ask a question? If it's not finished and it's still in draft and you're still working on it and your supervisor hasn't seen it, her supervisor hasn't seen it, how did it get to Vice President LeBron?
I can answer that question. I had received a copy of the budget book and how it was going to look. In prior years, the budget book was submitted in a binder format. We were trying a new format that actually binds the document together with staples. And so we wanted to make sure that the board was going to be okay with not having a binder and be okay with the document as it was. I shared some photos of that with you, Dr. Jallo, and I spoke to District Clerk Wade. And because we were concerned about the board not knowing that the format was not going to be a binder, the recommendation was made that I share the aesthetic version with Commissioner LeBron to make sure that we were on the right track, because we're going to have staff working over the weekend to print the book out.
And I just want to say, like, the issues I have, obviously there's lots of things that we actually need to correct anyway in this entire process. The last couple of weeks have been, you know, the most hectic I've ever worked in the district. So there are things we're going to have to do to fix whatever's happening as we move forward. But so my feedback isn't on the aesthetics. My feedback is, wait a minute, there's a whole entire detail section. And if we're saying we're going to be more transparent, and let me just say this is one subsection of it. There are lots of parts that I actually do love, and I do think it is more aesthetically pleasing, easier to follow, especially the school profiles. So it's not a criticism to the entire book. It's a criticism to the fact that there's a whole entire subsection that I know for a fact this community will want to see, and that they will want to know how we spend dollars and what dollars are going to in central office. So we can't just say we're gonna give a high level overview, because that's what's in there. It's a very high level overview. Here's our entire budget, here's a few positions. And it's confusing because if I don't know that the superintendent's office has all of these other people that report up to her and what a cabinet looks like, I'm not going to get that from this actual draft book. So this is where I'm at. I'm not supporting the budget book as it stands without detailed information about central office, including the Board of Education's budget. And so this is why I requested this meeting, so that the board can make a determination if you all want to support it without that information and just a high level overview. I've done my part as the finance chair to say I don't support it. I don't think it's transparent enough. And I know that this community will ask for that information. And it's not enough to just hide it onto the website.
Vice President LeBron, I know that President Elliott had to come back in on her phone. And so if you're able to see the waiting room, I do see hands up right now. I have Commissioner Powell's hand is up, Commissioner Simmons' hands is up. I saw Commissioner CFO Pierce, your hand was up, but I don't know if you still wanted to speak.
Kalia, can you call on folks, because I can't see them? I have to.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem. Commissioner Powell.
I know it's not the purpose of our call, but from the aesthetic side of things, let me just answer Marisol's question. First of all, I don't know why one person would be allowed to speak for all of us. She has no idea what our idea of what a good aesthetic would be, but I can tell you that a stapled copy can't possibly lay flat when we're working through it. So I could support something that's like plastic ring bound, like we've gotten our CIP document in the past, but not a stapled copy. It has to be able to lay flat on a desktop.
Okay, I just want to respond that it wasn't just the aesthetic of it being binded, not binded. That's not my decision. It was to look at the layout of it. So just for clarity, I personally don't care if it's binded on a ring binder. I do not care about those details. So I just want to be very clear about that.
The next hand up is Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Kalia. I want to just really acknowledge kind of the same sentiments as far as aesthetics. I'm more concerned with content and knowing that the community is getting transparent information that's very clear, concise, and understandable, especially the fact that we have an influx of dollars. People are extremely concerned about how are we putting these dollars or allocating these dollars to support our children first and foremost. And if we are not able to display that in this budget book in a way that's understandable, or if there's missing information, we need to be about fixing that. So we want to make sure we are being transparent. So I'm supporting anything that's going to make the communication more transparent. Speaking of transparency, I really have to say that we can't pretend that there's no dysfunction. It's showing up in the work. At this point, from the board to administration, there's a level of dysfunction that is unacceptable to serving the children and the families of this community. We need to get it together and get it right, because we have to answer to the community. That's all I need to say.
I don't see any additional hands raised at this time. Unless Commissioner Powell, do you have a new hand up? Commissioner Powell? Okay, well, I don't see any additional hands apart from Commissioner Powell's at this time.
Do you want me to show the dollar department information?
Yes, Terry, I think that that's important because we haven't gotten to that point yet, and that's part of the conversation. So if we could look at that now, thank you.
So what was laid out in the crosswalk was, and what we did is we researched the other big fours to see if they had departmental pages, and two of them do not have departmental pages, and one of them has just printouts from their financial systems for each department. They don't actually make department pages. So what we were doing is we were trying to come up with a layout that would be understandable and concise. And so we started with this top level. This is the budget for each department. So just like the layout we had for the FTEs, these 5 don't report to a deputy. And we have those 2 sections broken out for each of the departments that report up to each deputy. And then this is the total budget. And then we come down to another table that shows the personnel cost of each of those departments. So if you can look at the FTE tables, then this is the cost for those FTEs for each of these departments. So those are attached to those. And then a third table of non-personnel operating costs, and what we refer to as the operating budgets of each of those departments laid out in the same format. And that is what we presented when we did the redesign. So I just wanted to, that's where we're at.
CFO Pierce has her hand up.
Yes, I wanted to remind the commissioners as well that you had received a line-by-line full disclosure of the entire general fund budget. And so that material was in the packet that was delivered to you Tuesday. That is more information than has ever been given in the past. Again, where we go from today is exactly, we would need to know exactly based on what Terry just showed you, because again, there was no intent not to be totally completely transparent. The intent was actually to meet our community's request, and that was to make the book more user-friendly. And we had been told by the community that there was too much information within the book, that it was not easy for them to understand. So if we had, I'm happy to listen to hear what you have to say with regard to what, after now Terry's gone through both portions, both the staffing as well as the expenditures and the tying back to show the correlation. We would need to know exactly what more you're looking for to make a determination as far as what we can add. The SIRSA and ARP information is delivered to you in a quarterly format as required. So you do have that information. We will have links available, again, that people can access that information. It'll be kept right up to date. So again, please, whatever information you feel is still missing between those two sections now being spelled out, we would need to know your desires, because we have to determine how much of a delay then in the delivery of the budget book there will be based on the amount of information that you are requesting to add.
Please remember, like, the entire budget is also up in the front, laid out by function, which is what the new layout was going to be. The information is also up there as a total district.
Terry, can you take us to the front part just to show, so that, again, because not everyone has had the opportunity to view the book.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
the
Well,
unfortunate thing.
yeah, but while he's pulling that up, I just want to add again that I'm specifically requesting section 5. There were other sections that were removed that I also don't think needed to be in there, like the entire strategic plan that's available online. I would support a hyperlink, a direction to where the landing page is, and so forth. But again, section 5 is the entire section that I'm requesting goes back in there. We can't just focus in on schools only and pretend that there's not this entire function of central office and details, because that doesn't tell me, that says partnerships. I don't know what partnerships mean in the context of that line that you just showed, that chart. It also doesn't show the number of consultants we're hiring, how dollars are spent in the superintendent's cabinet versus the Board of Education versus other departments, again, like legal and human capital and so forth, functions of central office. So I don't know if I'm not speaking clearly enough that I'm requesting the entire section 5 be put back with that level of detail. But let me just, if I'm not, please let me know. Just let me know if it's not making sense. I just need to know at this point.
It makes sense. So given that request, I think it's important because we do have a process that's a timeline associated with the process. Given that understanding, and I know that hasn't been voted on yet, but I think it's important to talk about how long would it take to recreate section 5, to put it back in the book? And what are we looking at as far as estimations there? Terry, that's a question I think for you, correct?
I understand. Yes, Dr. Myers, I was trying to think about it.
Okay.
It's a big,
It's hard to
question. That's a lot of work. We'd have to
just
put them
looked it up.
back in
Terry,
the Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Terry, I just looked it up, and in last year's book, it was 100 pages that would be added back into the book. So that would be a significant amount of time, labor hours. And I know that was one of the concerns that we had talked about, was the amount of time the book was taking to put together. So it's in last year's book, it appears to be about 100 pages would have to go back in. Sorry, Terry, I just wanted to make people aware of the significance.
Yeah, and we would have to maybe like redesign them so I know each department's like 3 or 4 pages, maybe redesign them to like 1 page each or something along those lines. Because the information is laid out different now and more concise to the reader, and keeping in the same format that we already have the rest of the book. You want it all laid out the same. So we would have to redesign those. We couldn't use our old design, I don't think. It wouldn't look the same. It would be confusing. So we'd have to redesign them, because we have templates that we used to use for years, and then we just had to make all new templates this year. So I don't know how long all those templates would take. I'd have to talk to my team and try to find out. I don't know how long redesign takes. That's something you go through a process. You develop those pages and see what kind of hiccups you get, and then you work through those. Hard to take a guess on the spot. Couple weeks.
So it was my understanding that some of this information was going to be shared through the website. And I wonder, Terry, if rather than trying to incorporate it right now into the book, we can work that into the final budget book. If this could be put together and hyperlinked on the budget website the way that our teams were working on putting some other documents together.
Are you referring to the department pages that Vice President LeBron is requesting? Is that what?
Yes. So is it possible to put the information in a hyperlink and then have it formatted for the final book?
My only concern with that request, Marisol, is that we have to deliberate on these things. So as we're talking about closing the structural deficit and only focusing on schools and what's in that book, we're not going to be able to like look at those departments. At this point, I am going to recommend, this will be my recommendation, that we go back to a ring binder, because we can start the deliberations on what's already there in terms of the schools and the other departments. It is a very high level. And I just want to be clear, I'm not making an accusation that it's intentionally to be not less transparent, but it's not transparent. And so I just want to be I want to be transparent that I do not believe that the way that high level overview is not transparent enough for our community. So if we start the deliberations, that section can be completed, and I would need a timeline. Throwing it out there weeks on end does not make me comfortable, not knowing what the timeline is going to actually be and when we can expect it. But if we do it as a ring binder, it could be the last section, if you will, that we deliberate on and do the Q&A back and forth with the administration.
We can't just redesign these. Like we've put in hundreds of hours on this redesign, and I understand that you want the information, but this was what we agreed upon, and this is what we worked towards. I can't just make it faster. It's not how it works.
Well, Terry, this is where we're at. We're not, I personally, again, I'm going to let the board vote. If the board wants to vote on a budget book that does not contain detailed information around central office, that is the will of the board. I, Commissioner Beatrice LeBron, cannot accept a budget book without that information. And I don't think it's right. And I don't care. I am sorry that you've worked on hundreds of hours, but we obviously have some dysfunction that we need to address moving forward. We're not there yet. We're still in the middle of all of this stuff, even with the state. So as we move forward, we will figure out a different process in the future so that none of us are here again. However, this is where we're at right now. So I need a timeline. And if you can't give me a timeline, then I will ask your supervisor to then give a timeline. Somebody's got to have a timeline. But I cannot accept the budget book without detailed information of subsection 5 in our previous draft budget books. That's where I'm at.
It looks like President Elliott, are you trying to speak? I thought I saw. Okay, maybe not. Go ahead, Vice President LeBron. I'm not seeing anyone else with hands raised, unless I know you're using your phone, President Elliott, so let us know.
What I just wanted to clarify is what Vice President LeBron said. she's requesting section 5. So we need to produce that. I also heard her say that we could look at that towards the end. So if we produced a budget book that was in a binder and that we can add that section as soon as that's able to be completed, that would be satisfactory. I just want to make sure, want to do a say back and make sure that's what I heard.
Correct, Dr. Mary Smalls, and we
Okay.
will, Talia and I can work on making sure that deliberations around that section are
Okay.
at the third part of the deliberations versus the first two.
Okay. That's something that we could do and we could fulfill.
It's a complex
I have a
thing. I
question.
have to talk to my
Terry-
team about. It is
Yeah,
not-
Terry, look, let me interrupt you for a minute. If you don't have an answer, you don't have an answer. I'd rather you say you don't know,
I
you have to
don't-
consult. So you don't know. So let's stop, let's not beat that dead horse, right? You don't know. And I don't think anybody on this screen knows. So don't give false, not false, don't throw dates out there and you're not sure. Take the time and energy. And really, it's not on you, it's on the superintendent. The superintendent has to work with her team to figure out, because it's not just you who produces the book, right? It's a collaboration of different departments coming together to produce a book. So it's the superintendent who should answer. It's the superintendent who can get back to this body and say, it's going to take between this time and that time, or this is our timeline, or this is a date. So I see you struggling to answer something that you are only part of, right? So let that be. I think you also, if you're thinking of changing the book or changing the binder or changing whatever it is you might be changing, that you really have to have a serious conversation about timeline. Because I think the book is what this organization uses to be the foundation of your deliberations. If I'm correct around that, and you need this product in order to have those deliberations in earnest, then you need to have a conversation also about not only when the book is available in whatever form it's going to be in, but when will you be able to still have something to ground your deliberations with. And so that's also a discussion that I think either the superintendent has to be part of her response to you, or you have the conversation here. But otherwise you'll be deliberating without something to deliberate on, right? So I think you have to figure that out as well. Okay, but we've gone through many dates over the last 7 days. So I would rather you wait and really have a codified date that you're sure that you can commit to and feel comfortable that you're going to meet that date, because we just can't keep missing deadlines here. It's affecting too many other people, including yourselves.
Can we make it
Dr.
clear?
Jallo, I
we-
just want to respond because yes, I can make sure that I coordinate it, but the folks who are working on it are it is the folks in the finance department. So if they
Right, but
need
this is,
to-
but Leslie, this should not be aired here.
Oh, I
This should
agree.
not be
Agreed.
aired here in front of your board. This is
Agreed.
something that you guys can work together, whatever departments have to collaborate, and then you say, I've collaborated, and here is what we know we all stand by that we can do. Right now, I only hear one person talking, and it's making me nervous, right? Because I know that it's a collaborative effort to create a book, right? So that's all I'm saying. Not here. I don't want to hear it here. I'll be honest with you. This is something that should be discussed amongst you. And then you come back to your board and say, hey, we got it. This date, we're going to have the numbers, we're going to have a book, we're going to have binders, we're going to have 20 copies in your hand by this date. And you can feel confident that you could use this book to begin your deliberations. That's all I'm
Agreed, and
saying.
agreed. And that's why I just wanted to clarify with Vice President LeBron that it would be acceptable, right? If the vote went that way to include section 5, that we could add that later. We absolutely need to take this conversation offline and work internally to make sure we have appropriate timelines, systems and structures in place to double check, to make sure we have fail safes and all of that. Completely agree.